IMF says Somalia's economic growth pace could rise to 3% in 2019. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimizi Obi. We get the show started now with the markets and major markets here in Africa. We're positive at intraday with the EGX 30 still in the lead, up 1.08%. The JSE index in South Africa was up 0.49%, while the NSC here in Nigeria was up 0.09%. Kenya closed in the red on Monday. In the Gulf region, markets were mostly positive at intraday except for the Abu Dhabi index, which was down 2.57%. Meanwhile, the Dubai index soared 3.46%. Qatar's index was up 0.60%, while Saudi Arabia was up 0.23% at intraday. And in Europe, stocks traded higher this morning as investors began to mitigate the sharp downturn caused by China's announcement of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. imports. Well, let's talk more about this with my colleague there in Frankfurt, Ashutosh Pandey. Hello, Ashutosh. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chime.
So, China's retaliation to U.S. tariff hike caused mayhem on the global stock markets. That was on Monday. How are the markets in Europe faring today, the morning after?
Well, Chime, today they are in a much better shape. The investors do have some sort of confidence, and there is a broad consensus that eventually a trade deal will be reached between China and the U.S. This comes especially after Donald Trump saying to reporters in the White House yesterday that he would be meeting the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and perhaps that's the reason why they are optimistic about a deal here. The meeting will take place on the sidelines of G20 meetings in Japan sometime next month, and investors are hoping that the two leaders would be able to charm each other and perhaps come up with a deal. And that's one thing. The other thing that they are actually optimistic about is the fact that there is this tit-for-tat grace period that both the sides gave in the form of June 1st. So that the new tariffs don't kick in for the goods that are in transit. So they see this as a window of opportunity and a deal for the negotiators to eke out a deal. And because ultimately they know that both the sides understand that a trade war, a full-scale trade war, is not good for anybody, for that matter, not only China and the US, but the entire world. And we saw an example of it yesterday on the stock market here and elsewhere. In the US, for example, like 600 billion worth of market value was lost in the S&P 500 companies alone. And that's much more than the annual imports of Chinese goods to the U.S.
Now, President Trump has also threatened tariffs against European companies. How worried should the European companies be about how Trump is dealing with China?
Well, there is certainly some sort of apprehension here. The auto sector, for that matter, is worried because President Trump is expected to take a decision whether to impose tariffs on car imports sometime later this week on Saturday. By Saturday, he has to take that decision. And if I give you some numbers, here the biggest one that stands out is the fact that the European listed companies are expected to generate 1.2 trillion euros in revenue from the US. So you can imagine what kind of damage can a protracted trade war do in this case. And as you just mentioned, that Donald Trump has already threatened sanctions, tariffs against hundreds of European companies and running into billions worth of goods. So it's really not good for the European economy, and also at a time when the European economy is not really doing well. And it will, analysts believe that the European economy would not be will not be resilient enough to actually deal with a protracted trade war, because as resilient as the Chinese economy, as China is at this point of time, because the economy is not doing that well.
Now, there's a lot of quarterly earnings coming in all over the European markets right now, from Allianz to ThyssenKrupp, to EDF, and of course others. What do these numbers reveal about the state of the region's economy?
Well, Jimmy, yeah, loads of earning results today, and two stand out particularly for me, ThyssenKrupp and Vodafone, as far as giving trends for the region is concerned. So ThyssenKrupp posted a loss for the second quarter. It blamed the economic slowdown in the region, especially the automotive sector. Now, automotive sector has been a cause of concern for Europe, and that's mostly to do with the slowdown in China, which is a major market for these automakers, especially the German ones. And so China's auto sales have gone down for 10 quarters now, straight 10 quarters. Sales have fallen. So that's a cause of concern for the auto sector, and ThyssenKrupp's results definitely allude to that. And the other is Vodafone. Now, Vodafone has cut its annual dividend by 40%, and this is the first time that it has actually cut its dividend, and it says that it's actually shoring up finances for the high 5G spectrum auction costs. So, and that's also a cause of concern, because the 5G auctions are expected to be, could go northwards, and they are expected to be a lot of burden for these telecom companies when they start their bidding process.
All right, thank you for those market updates, Ashutosh.